Welcome back to the Carp Angler Chronicles podcast. Of course, we have part 2 with Stephen White, where Stephen goes into even more depth about the kind of bait he would choose to target specific fish. If you are someone who is targeting the bigger fish of the venue, you're not going to want to miss this. Make sure you tune in, take notes. I know I certainly learned a thing or two from this podcast. I know Pete did as well, and I'm sure you will too. So we hope you enjoy it. Before we jump in, of course, I need to mention our awesome sponsor, carphuntergiveaways.co.uk. Check them out whilst you're enjoying this episode with Stephen White.
Bait making is so personal. I mean, with the Dean episode and the Jason episode, for example, I mean, both those guys make fantastic bait, but yet they said sort of contrasting things.
Dino knows more about bait than practically anyone in terms of real geek stuff that he knows about.
Yeah.
But commercial baits have to be all things to all people.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
So the lads who make their own bait, you literally you can change your bait week by week. Mm-hmm. You know, if Dino's selling his Super Orange, if there's a slight difference in colour, the customer's kicking off before he even starts fishing. But as you know, as a bait maker, fish meal comes as different colours.
Yeah.
Depending on if you buy a low temperature fish meal, depending whether it's mostly herring or it's whiting or it's capelin or whatever it is, it's still LT94, but it can be completely different. It can even have different texture. You can have stuff that's more gritty because it's got more skeletal bits in it, or if it's a whole fish made with a small whole fish, it can be a lot smoother. But a bait maker's got to cope with that and sell it to his customer. His customer says, "Oh, mate, it's like a tenth of a shade less orange this week."
Yeah.
Dino knows it's the exact same bait, but you've got customers are just hard work, aren't they, when it comes to things like that? Because they don't know. So if anything's different, then they're suspicious, aren't they? Whereas when I go in, this week, if I fancy, like I said, when I had my UK PB recently, was a bait I literally ran out of ingredients as such. I just used everything. So I thought, right, just whacked a load of LT in it. I think that was it. I run out of CPSP 90, so I just thought, right, well, it's going 8% liver hydro, bang. I'd run out of something. I think I'd run out of kelp. I couldn't make the Grenville's Golden Balls mix. I didn't have the stuff for it. I was missing something or other. So I had a load of MPEG Speller, which I whacked in. And I thought, well, I'm not even rolling this because this is not going to roll. I'm bricking it. So I cling filmed it up and just chopped it into bits. Mm-hmm. The good thing about having bait knowledge is I was confident that bait was good, even though I'd literally thrown it together, not even to a recipe. And the one thing I say to everybody, because I will talk to anybody about bait, and people just, honestly, when I start talking about bait, most anglers just want to die. You can see their eyes glazing over. It's like, no, just shut him up. Talk about
You're on
football.
The right podcast, mate.
Yeah, but normal anglers, they want to talk about football, beer, tits, and what you're catching. And I start talking about bait and they're like, just go away. But the one thing, the only advantage I have over all these anglers is I never doubt my bait. Like my mate Lee, right, on Acton, he's one of the best anglers on there. He's a quiet lad. He says nothing, and he has rinsed that place. He has rinsed it. He is a good angler. And in 2018, when the lake was moody because of the low oxygen, in 2017, he'd had 20 fish out by August, which is like 3 years worth for an average angler.
Yeah.
And in 2018, I don't think he caught for his first 10 sessions, and his head was falling off. And he was like, I'm changing my upbaits, I'm changing my rigs, I'm changing that. And he is a really good angler. I had the opposite. I'd had 6 fish in the first 6 trips, and then it all fell apart. But while it fell apart, I did a 21-night blank. But my head was not falling off because I knew it wasn't the bait. I had the ultimate confidence of the bait. As it turns out, probably misplaced. I should have gone in with my nut mix. But my point is, I just kept plowing through, and I caught, I caught the Randall in the autumn. Then in 2019, when it went badly, and I only had 3 originals, I stuck with that bait, and by September, I pulled a brace of 40s out of Grenville. Whereas if I didn't, I made that bait on paper, and I knew that was a good bait on paper. I knew that was going to catch fish. And when it didn't, I was like, oh, hold on. Right, I'm just going to carry on here. And the point is, the knowledge gave me the confidence to carry on, even though I was either catching stockies or blanking on it, and I knew it was a good bait. I knew it was different because that was the plan, for it to be different and not catch the big females. But the fact that I wasn't catching the big males, I wasn't catching a lot. Some of the times it was like, and the lake was fishing well, but I still had the confidence because I knew that was a good bait. And since then, I've had 2 40s off Acton, from June, July, 2 40s off Acton. Then I had a 48 and a 51 off Grenville on it. So, but what I'm saying is, without that confidence to stick with that bait, then I would have done something else. Or what would I have done? That is where bait knowledge is everything in terms of not the technical side of like lads who can tie these brilliant rigs and But my point is, lads coming into the sport now, how do they make a decision as to what bait they buy?
I think they're just heavily marketed, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. It's all. But what I'm saying is, they can't make an informed choice as to what bait. They're either going to go with what Ozolness is catching on, or they're going to go with whatever Darryl Peck's catching on, or Tom Maker, or any of these high-profile Instagram people, or Alan Blair, whoever. They're looking on Insta and they're using that bait, aren't they?
For sure.
And I'm on a couple of Facebook groups, which I don't really contribute to, but it's just people put pictures of rigs up and, the usual crap. Mm-hmm. And when someone says, what boilers should I use? Everybody says their own bait. And if you say, and they say, someone put a question up, shelf life or freezer bait, and all lads will go, shelf life, shelf life, shelf life, shelf life, shelf life. And I sometimes I get involved because I can't help myself. And it's like, yeah, shelf life is shit, mate. No, they're not. I catch loads of fish on it. And you think, mate, trust me on this. You're better off on freezer. And they'll say, oh, well, shelf lives aren't as bad as they used to be. Yeah, but they're still preserved.
There's no way around that, is there?
Even if, like, people like Jason says, his bait turns as soon as it gets wet. My point is, a freezer bait starts turning before it gets wet. Mm-hmm. Before you put it in the drink and wash those preservatives out, whatever they are, your freezer bait's turning. Yeah. And that's how you want it to. If you think about, people talk about sweating baits up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically, what you're doing is you're creating you put a bait in a poly bag. You took it out of the freezer. There's all sorts of microbiology in the air. It coats the outside of the bait. You stick the bait in a poly bag. You put it in anaerobic conditions. You've got a lot of lactobacillus. Yeah. Some of the lads in one of my online bait groups make their own hydros, and they basically capture lactobacillus on a rice wash, culture it, and start making their hydros. They're absolutely mental. They catch fish on them, and they love it. They make fruit hydros, fish hydros, all sorts of pineapple hydros. They just love pissing about with bait, which is further than I go. But I've been reading a bit about lactobacillus and stuff like that. And when I was telling you about Tony, who absolutely turned over the lower lake at Acton, he was into turning his baits. And he was using a commercial bait and turning them. And two things off that.
Was he using lactobacillus?
No, he wasn't using lactobacillus, but lactobacillus is all over the air. So as soon as if you turn a bait, that and yeast and all sorts of crap is getting on your bait. And then when you exclude oxygen, then you're getting anaerobic conditions. Mm-hmm. The bait he was using was from quite a well-known company. I'm not going to name it. But I've got a mate in one of the bait groups who works in a food lab in Southern Ireland. And he got sent some samples off this well-known bait group. It's not one of the big three, but it's big.
Yeah.
And he analysed them. and there's 2 fish meals and 1 seed meal. One of the fish meals came out at 19%, roughly 33% moisture, 19% protein. The other fish meal, which is a big seller in the UK, and it's hot, if you catch me drift,
Right.
23% protein. And the seed mix, the cream seed mix, was, I can't remember off the top of my head, 13% or something, which you'd expect from a seed mix, but even so, you know.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is, Tony turned that lake over using that Borrelian particle, but he was turning them. So it wasn't the nutritional side of the bait, because if you're looking at a fish meal between 19 and 23% crude protein, there ain't a lot of fish meal in that. It was the fact, the attraction. He was forming organic acids on his bait by turning it, and the way he was fermenting his particle, and he was catching a lot of fish. He wasn't discriminating between size of fish. He was catching a hell of a lot of stockies, but he was catching them all winter long as well. And that ties in, because I thought he's doing well on a fish meal, that kid, over winter. Not that fish meals don't catch, but just on bulk protein, as Dino said, you're not digesting a lot of protein in winter. Well, the bait he was using had rock all protein in it, but he was turning them.
That's got to be a huge edge as well, isn't it, for the guys who do short sessions? If you can have a bait turning sort of before you're putting it in the water.
Before he's putting it in. And that is what I did in my solid bag fishing. On Grenville, it's boilie only. So you can't use pellets in your solid bags. It's also a 3-ounce lead rule. So I can't cast a 3-ounce lead more than 90 yards. You need to be going at least 110 as a starting. So you can fish solid bags. So after speaking to Tony, normally I hot soak my freebies, but you don't want to be hot soaking them to put in a solid bag. So with this Grenville's Golden Balls mix, because of the success I've had with organic acids and the fermentation and the turning of the baits, is obviously, I think, is forming organic acids. So I started whacking a load of Belacan in the Grenville's Golden Balls, not putting any liquids in, and then I'd take a kilo out of the bait, and I probably refroze it 6-7 times, and then I was putting in the crusher. I was crushing them up, but leaving some good nuggets in. Some of it was going to dust, and then I was putting a little stick over the hook point, so then I could get it down. But I think it was a combination of the colour, but also all the baits. You can smell the organic acids in it. And this is what we're talking about. This leads to what Patrick was saying. Patrick was saying amino acids have an extremely narrow concentration in terms of what they do. Now, 2 things what I not have a problem with what he's saying, but in terms of the application, what I use, I'm not pole fishing. I'm not whacking in every 15 minutes. I'm whacking in some more attraction to keep that level within a specific molar concentration. Given that 1 cubic meter of water is 1,000 litres, look at the dilution of something like Grenville, where it's 26 foot deep on average. What's the dilution in that lake? So what's feasible is, I think the stuff he's doing is feasible for match fishing. But if you're waiting 24 hours to 48 hours for a bite, how do you, amino acids, the only way that they're working is how I'm using them, is it works when they chew the bait. And also, the other thing is he's concentration on olfaction. Yeah, which gets something, which initiates what's called searching behaviour, as in the chewing the gravel. Whereas I want gustation. I want that fish to want to eat that bait. And I think in terms of amino acids, the one which catches, which makes them want to eat, is L-glutamine. Yeah. In association with other stuff in that bait. So even in a pre-digested fish meal, you've got a lot of 5-inosine monophosphate. You've got other nucleotides. You've got the ribonucleotides in the Brocacell. You're adding external aminos in the H3P. You throw in citric. the Belacan has got a shit ton of different, what I call the smelly ones. So if you look at Belacan, it's got like your Caproix, your Isovaleric, your Embutrix in various. Same with the Namplar, isn't it?
Yeah.
All those act on gustation. Dino highlighted it for me. He was on about citric years ago in an article he did for Cartwell, and he basically said, which I knew about but had never connected, because everything's about context. He said everything has a Krebs cycle, which is also known as the citric, as you'll know because you've done a lot of this stuff. It's the citric acid cycle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why citric acid and all the other organic acids are so stimulatory, but the stimulatory in terms of gustation, is they're all either citric acid, which is the Krebs cycle, or what's called metabolic intermediates like alpha-ketoglutarate. So basically, anything what is living, nearly everything works on the Krebs cycle, which is how not all, but most organisms produce energy. So anything what dies in that lake, like bloodworm or whatever, will be leaking citric acid, all the other metabolites and metabolic intermediates. Lactic acid, is a function of muscle activities, anaerobic muscle. So all these things. I tell you what, I put on a bait and I caught a fish on it. I put some red wine vinegar and some apple cider vinegar on some pop-ups. I made some corkball pop-ups.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the recipe right. I used to did a certain recipe and someone else said, no, you can put an extra 50% more cork dust in it. And I tried it and it didn't hold together well. But I put some red wine vinegar and some apple cider vinegar. Now, apples have got a lot of malic acid in them. And if you turn it into vinegar, you get acetic. So apple cider vinegar has got malic and acetic acid. Grapes have got a lot of tartaric acid in. So when you turn it into red wine vinegar, you get tartaric and acetic. So in that mixture, you've got tartaric, acetic, and malic acid. And I put them on some pop-up on the cork dust pop-ups. But they weren't that good in terms of structural integrity. But I did catch a fish on that using it as a snowman. Which I've not really done much because I hadn't used them because they weren't as firm as I like them. But again, those are 3 organic acids, carboxylic acids, and all of them. If you look at Katsumian and Dovin, he does it for, I think it's for tench and bitterling where it's got the palatability index. But for tench, all the organic acids are like next level on the palatability index.
Yeah.
So if you want the, I had this discussion with Dino. I think there is a synergy, and I don't know what the biological mechanism, but I think there's a synergy between organic acids, amino acids, and nucleotides, things like that. I don't know. I'm not sure it's fully chemoreceptive. I don't know what it is. In humans, you know what synergy is, don't you? Mm-hmm. I explained to you before. Basically, if you stimulate one muscle group and then fire another muscle group off, you get an amplified response in that second muscle group. Now, I'm wondering if there is that sort of response in fish, as in if something like an organic acid stimulates a different receptor, say from an amino acid, does it give an amplified response if it has both in the bait? I don't know because I've not read anything about it, but in my mind, that's why fish meals work so well.
Do you have any sort of thoughts on using TMA with carboxylic acids?
I don't, but my mate Gaz Nevison, he owns Nutritional Bait Development. He has a squid flavour which has got a lot of TMA in it, and he reckons it absolutely rinses. And I keep meaning to get some pop-ups off him because I can't be arsed making fluoro pop-ups because I hardly use them. I only use them in solid bags on Grenville. So I can't be arsed making 3 different colours of I don't really fish single baits that much because I want to get a feed response for the reasons I've outlined in terms of fish stimulation. So I struggle with single hook bait fishing. But he's into TMA. He's got a squid flavour, and he reckons it is. And I trust that guy. That guy knows about bait, and he says that squid flavour is the nuts.
Yeah. Does he use it in conjunction with carboxylic acids at all?
I think he uses Embutric in his pot. I don't know what he puts in his pop-ups, but I've got a couple of my mates to buy bait off him, and they've done well on them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he puts Embutric in with a squid, and I think that does the nuts.
Yeah.
On singles as well. I know it pulled there's a syndicate in the Midlands called the Bowl, and there's a 40-pound fully in there, and the kid had it on his bait. There's a kid been on Grenville on his bait who's fishing the cabin, but he's rinsed it. So yeah, I think there's mileage there. I don't know much. To be fair, I don't know much about TMA and TMAO. TMO and oxide.
That's right. Yeah.
But massive fan of Solar Squid and Octopus.
Yeah.
Which they don't make it anymore. I don't know if Solar is still selling it, but
they do, but it's not the same, I believe.
Yeah, well, right. I can tell you now because they don't make it anymore. It used to come from a company called Nutriad, and its trade name is Adarome Squid. And I tracked it down to the manufacturer. Basically, I tried getting some. I was using a squid and octopus, and it was 20 quid a bottle for 100 ml, and I thought, that is dear. It was adding £1.20 to a kilo of boilies.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is dear for a flavour. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't that I couldn't afford it. I just thought it was taking the piss out compared to what else I was putting in. So I rang Lockie and said, can I buy a litre off you? And he come back with a price not much different from the what I was buying in the shops in 100, in the 100 ml bottles.
Yeah.
I thought, sack that. So I tracked down the Adarome powder to a place in the Midlands, and I could get a kilo, but I had to buy 20 kilo box. And I thought, I'm not buying a 20. What am I going to do with 20 kilos of the powder? It was spray dried onto silicon dioxide, but it's still, what am I going to do with 20 kilos? I couldn't be arsed selling it. And I managed to get a kilo of the powder from a pellet place, and they were selling it as Squid Attract. But I still wanted the liquid, so I eventually tracked the manufacturer down, and it was Adarome Squid. But again, they wanted to buy 25 litres of it, and it was $2,500. So at the time, I was getting my bait ingredients off a guy called Glenn, who used to have Burton bait rollers, and at the time, his ingredients were really good. He was in one of our bait groups. He used to do baits and contract roll, and his ingredients were good. And I started doing a bit of consulting for him, and I kept saying, I said, right, this is where it comes from. This is what it costs. But yes, it's 100 quid a litre, but it's getting diluted when it's being sold commercially. So it's only costing 20 quid a litre, equivalent of what you're buying in the shops for 200 quid. So, but he had to lay out $2,500. So it took time, but I got him to buy some. And I ended up getting a 250 ml of the uncut stuff, which was equivalent to 1.25 litres. And I used a lot of the squid and octopus, and I loved it. Mm. And obviously the rumor is that is either TMA or TMAO,
yeah,
in it. And I've always loved that flavour. So yeah, it's trimethylamine in it, so it's what you get from fish decomposition. So it's been proven as the TMA and as the TMA, the trimethylamine N oxide are both good feed stimulants, aren't they?
That's it.
But what you're saying is there's some synergy between that and organic acids.
Yes.
Which would make, I look at things now, when you say something like that, I think, well, what's the evolutionary advantage of that? Well, the evolutionary advantage I see that is if you've got rotting fish, the cell membranes are producing Embutric and caproic, and the proteins are producing TMA as they degrade, won't they?
Sounds good to me. Do you know what? I've not looked at it at that depth.
Right. No, this is off the top of my head. I haven't looked into it. I'm just saying, if when protein, I'm presuming trimethylamines and amines. Amines come from protein decomposition, I'm presuming.
Yeah. Yes.
So if you've got rotten fish giving off TMA,
mm-hmm.
It's because the protein's degrading. Well, the fats in the fish. Say you had a dead trout, yeah. as the protein, the muscle degrades, it will produce TMA. Does it produce the oxide first and then that degrades to TMA? I think that's how. I'm not sure how. Anyway, the point
TMA,
is it's producing
TMA
one
first.
or both. Yeah, TMA and then TMA and oxide, whatever. So it's producing TMA as the protein degrades. As the fats become acted on by anaerobic bacteria, it'll produce all the valerics, the caproics. So from a cart's point of view, something dead is going to give, with protein, protein degrading and fats degrading, and it doesn't have to be a fatty fish. It could be the cell membrane fatty acids. That is telling the carp that there's some dead protein, something what was alive is now dead and is getting pre-digested for it right there on that spot where that smell's coming off. So that would make sense.
So, do you know, I used to have a paper on this, and I'll probably get sort of slated and all sort of remarks from the back of this podcast for saying this, but it's something to do, and this is off the top of my head. I've had a few beers, and I'm a little bit foggy, but it's something to do with the reaction with the TMA or the TMAO and the carboxylic acid. Something to do with that reaction produces a byproduct of that reaction.
Right, so it's not just a synergy between, in terms of chemoreception, it's an actual chemical reaction.
Correct.
All right, cool.
And like I say, I've probably
didn't
said
know
that.
Every day's a school day.
Yeah, maybe. But do you know what? So I haven't got the paper anymore, and I've searched and searched and searched high and low on the internet, and I can't come across it. So if anybody out there's got anything on it, I would be very interested if they wanted to send that across.
Right. So do you think that's forming the trimethylamine N oxide?
No, I don't think so. But this is where
my chemistry isn't that strong.
No, nor's mine. And honestly, it's been since my sort of laboratory days and stuff at university. It's a long time ago now, mate.
Well, it's 30 years since I graduated. So, it was 1992 when I graduated, and I drank a lot of beer at uni. So, it's 29 years since I last did anything academic. So, but that's interesting, because I would have thought, or I suspect, that there is a synergy in terms of whether you call it taste or gustation or the various things.
Yeah.
I think that there's a synergy going on.
Mm-hmm.
But like in humans, like Patrick Mills said, if you, like in strawberry jam, you've got sugar, you've got the fruit acids, and you've got all the esters out of the fruit and all the polyphenols and all that crap. And all those things combine in humans to give you a massive taste response. If you have a clotted cream scone or whatever from where you're from, you've got all those, plus you've got the mouthfeel off the cream, haven't you? And all the lactones in the cream and everything else.
Yeah.
Now, there's a synergy in the taste response. Like when you eat a bacon butty with tomato sauce, you've got the glutamate out of the tomato, you've got the salt and the nitrites out in the bacon and the nucleotides in the bacon, the yeast in the bread. My point is, I suspect, but don't know, that there's a similar synergy going on in carp. And that's why fish meals are so good. Meat meals, so if like Sean talks about meat meals, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You're getting some, a lot of, you've got the nucleotides, you've got the L-glutamines, you've got a lot of stuff going on in meat meals of a similar stimulatory functions, or stimulatory properties, sorry. So yeah. Anyway, I've kind of lost the track of where we're going with that, and I'm not drunk.
Nice.
We're talking about TMA, weren't we?
Yeah, it went on to the subject. This is the wonderful thing about podcasts. We can meander.
I just go off at tangents and never necessarily come back, but just not quite as amusing as Billy Connolly when he does it. So
sorry to cut in. Sorry to cut in there. The thing with TMAO is it starts with TMA, it turns into TMAO. But you two are talking
under
about
what process? Is that a manufactured process or a natural one?
it depends where it happens. So, I mean, even humans will convert TMA into TMAO. It depends where it happens. So it can happen in the body through like an active process. It can happen through, as far as I'm aware, it can happen through decomposing bodies or muscle tissue. But the thing is, you're talking about the different compounds of TMA and, you know, what it is it synergy, etc. It's basically choline, betaine, and I think carnitine. Now, if you look at those three things, certainly choline, as Dean has said in previous
choline
podcasts,
is massively attractive, isn't it?
Really attractive. Betaine, you know, it depends if you're on Dr. Patrick Mills' camp or probably our camp. But all these things, interestingly enough, are very attractive to carp in their own right. So I think there's huge crossover in a lot of these things, and I think a lot of these ingredients that seem to have like these kind of miraculous effects on the carp's chemoreception and gustation, generally they all kind of like start to tie back, don't they, to a similar theme. And I think this is where
also think about to jump in there.
Yeah.
Pineapple flavor. Pineapple flavor is either, I think it's methyl butyrate. It's either ethyl butyrate or methyl butyrate. One of them's peach and one of them's pineapple.
Ethyl butyrate.
Well, basically, they're based on
pineapple.
butyric acid, aren't they? Is it ethyl butyrate?
Ethyl. Yeah, you're more northern than me. I'd call it ethyl.
Yeah.
Ethyl
I'm a
butyrate.
Northerner.
Yeah, that's pineapple, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it's very similar to butyric acid. All the cream flavors are based on butyric acid. Scopex.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, exactly, and it kind of all kind of ties up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Here's a question I want to ask you as well.
Go
on. Sorry, carry on. I'll get it in a minute.
No, I was going to say, I mean, and you know, flavors that are rich in butyric acid, team them up with N-butyric acid, generally they do well. I mean, pineapple and N-butyric, fucking classic, isn't it? And like you say, there's crossover there. So I think, personally, I think synergy, and I've been thinking about this a lot over the years, but more so recently, I think synergy of ingredients and different compounds, I think that's really where you can start hitting into some things that work above and beyond the other things. You know, I think that is where, say, us as bait makers, we're looking for the holy grail. We're looking for the biggest edge we can get. Right, that tends to be our edge in our angling, isn't it? And I honestly think it's not looking for the new like shiny ingredient. It's looking at ingredients, putting them together, and seeing what their effect is of those ingredients together. I think that is
absolutely
the way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But sorry to interrupt. You and Pete have been...
No, it's fine. Tailoring those things to specific carp if you can find that information. Well, you mentioned one of the podcasts. I can't remember who it was. It could have been Dino. Because I listened to the Sean Harrison one, the Jason Ryder one, and the Dino one in pretty quick succession.
Yeah.
You mentioned bioflavonoids, and whoever you spoke to didn't really pick up on it.
Dean.
What were you trying to get out there? Because basically spices have bioflavonoids on them, don't they?
They do, yeah.
One of my favourite spices is turmeric, and I know that's got bioflavonoids in it.
Yeah, what
were you getting at there?
What do you think is attractive about turmeric?
Well, a few things. It's got carotene, it's got carotenoids in it from the colour, and it's got a lot of bioflavonoids in it.
So what do you think they're doing though?
Right, well, bioflavonoids are antioxidants, aren't they? Carotenoids are definitely attractive to carp. You've got canthaxanthin, you've got xanthins, you've got carotenoids themselves, vitamin A. Carotenoids, generally speaking, if you look at Robin Red, what's in Robin Red is carotenoids. In your Spanish red pepper, yes, you've got citric acid, yes, you've got probably other organic acids, but you've got a shit ton of carotenoids, haven't you? Paprika's got carotenoids in it.
Yeah.
and a lot of bioflavonoids. Another thing I was interested in a long time ago. I never tried it. It was just a passing thought. Rose hips. Rose hips are super high in bioflavonoids and vitamin C. I thought if you could get a rose hip powdered rose hips, I reckon that would be a banging ingredient. But I don't know. I've not found any. I've not really looked into bioflavonoids on carp, but Imperial Carp in Germany sell the citrus bioflavonoids, don't they?
I have no idea.
Because they've got the NDHC sweetener, haven't they? That comes from citrus fruits. You know, the neoesperidine dialcohol.
I know that sweetener. I'm not too knowledgeable on it, to be honest with you. I didn't know it was a bioflavonoid.
No, I don't know anything about it other than it comes from citrus fruits. But the same company who sells that sell a product called citrus bioflavonoids.
Right.
They actually sell it to put in dog food to you like this one, enhance stool firmness.
Yeah.
I remember Glyn saying something about citrus bioflavonoids. There's an additive, and I think they were putting it in at about 10 grams per kilo, so 1%.
I mean, going to answer your question, what I brought this up in the you got to understand, I'm a nutritionist, a human nutritionist, so
yeah,
I'm working on that basis, and I see things from a different angle. It's just then the task of translating that into the world of carp we're very different from carp. I think if you kind of subscribe to the idea that carp know what's good for them, they know what feels good when they eat it, and they can kind of start latching onto foods that are perhaps filling a gap within their dietary needs. That's one level, right? So let's say a certain bait has got a certain vitamin or mineral or even an amino acid that they're perhaps lacking in. You could say that carp's going to latch on. I think if you to go down deeper than that, I mean, if you look at really what ages a carp and humans, you're looking at telomere length, you're looking at free radical damage. When you introduce something like bioflavonoids,
they scavenge free radicals, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. They're dealing with free radicals. They're basically annihilating them or mopping them up, is commonly said. They're these polyphenols that are often derived from plants. I think when you get them in spices, don't you? They have a real kind of therapeutic effect on the damage that happens to humans as well as carp on a cellular level.
Sure.
So I think that is the next stage up from filling holes of mineral deficiencies or amino acid deficiencies or whatever it might be. I think it's the actual, dealing with cellular stress, dealing with how carp age, the wear and tear that they have on their body, not only through the rigors of, say, spawning, etc., and just growing and living, but also different food
just old age,
substance to. Because if you look at a carp, what they eat nowadays, they have a huge percentage of their diet in these lakes that are fish, certainly. A huge percentage of their diet is not natural to them. It's a man-made thing. And naturally with that, it's going to carry a lot of stress to the carp, and it is going to change them on a cellular level.
Especially with shelf life, boilish, preservatives.
Yeah, loads of stuff. We could go on all night naming the different things. That is going to stress the carp on a cellular level, is going to cause some ill effect to their biology. Now, I think maybe it would make good sense to introduce into the feed different compounds, polyphenols, bioflavonoids that actually help undo some of this ill doing from all of our bait. That was where I was edging with it. I think Dean actually thought that I was saying that they were unattractive to carp. That I don't think they bear any attraction.
No, absolutely not.
But
that's where I think spices come in personally. I personally think the benefit of spices. Certainly, I'm into turmeric.
Yeah.
I think it is the polyphenols and the bioflavonoids, which I think that there's some sort of attraction there anyway. I don't know exactly what's in those baits. I just know it improves them very much. And also, from my point of view, no one's putting it in their bait. In Lakes I'm fishing, there isn't a lot of. I mean, one of the key baits has got it in, I think, because it's that colour. I'm using it as a colour, but I've also put it in my dark fish meal, and it's done very well. I used to use garlic and fenugreek.
Yeah.
But I changed over to turmeric. Just because I thought I wanted to try it, and I've not looked back since. But yeah, when you mentioned that, it sort of got sidestepped, and I was like, yeah, because I reckon there's a lot in the original Robin Red with the paprika and the Spanish red peppers. I reckon there's a lot of polyphenols and bioflavonoids in that.
Yeah, well,
and fish used to go mental for it. I don't think it's the same product as it used to be, and it isn't because it's been changed to the hook bait stroke feed bait, but it still stands. It is another point, is just another aside. That bait that I took to France when I ripped Stream Lakes, a new one, I actually put paprika in the nut mix. First and only time I've ever done it. I don't know. I just got it into my head. I thought, right, I'm making a big load of it. I'm going to try some paprika in it, and that did well. I'm not saying it's the paprika because I think it was the fat content, but that's the only time I put paprika in my bait, and it's something that I intend to return to. The only thing what stops me is Acton, before he put the stockies in, was so hard that it wasn't a place to experiment and actually learn something from, because you could do a 21 night blank when you were doing everything right. So when you're experimenting, you're not getting enough feedback in order to determine something. Anyway, just as another aside, the thing you said about old carp, when I was on Selbit, I was using the full fat GLM at quite high levels. And I think it was Mark McKenna. It was a 2013 Northern Angling Show, the first ever one, and Mark McKenna was there when he had Baitcraft. And we're talking about GLM. And he said it's not worth the money because the defatted stuff, the normal stuff you buy at 30 quid a kilo, has had the oil taken off. And basically what he was saying was the oil is sold as an anti-inflammatory in capsule form. He was saying it's a very bioactive oil in terms of inflammatory, and I think they're only about 8% oil. When you get the GLM meat, they basically cold press it to get the oil off it, which is about 8%, and then they freeze dry and grind what's left and sell it for the pet foods, and it's got glucosamine in it and what have you. But he said it's the oil what's worth it, and the fish, when I had Rosie in 2013, she was like 40 odd years old. That bait had full fat GLM in it. And I was just wondering if full fat if older carp, older mirrors like full fat GLM for its anti-inflammatory properties.
Yeah. I use it. I get it from FeedStim.
Yeah, because it's about 60 quid a kilo, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not cheap. Yeah, it's painful.
And if you're putting it in at sort of 5 to 7%, it adds like 2 quid a kilo, 3 quid a kilo to your boiler, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I'm not. I don't make feed baits now, but I'm on the hook bait kind of thing. But yeah, which is cheaper.
No, what about from a feed bait point of view? But I think that's the only. I think if I was using a full fat GLM. I tell you, the reason I stopped using it was because when I went from Selby to Nipton, I went on a couple of sessions and I caught my second trip out of 33. And then, but there was loads and loads of bream in Nipton, shit tons of bream. And I thought, I'm not paying for full fat GLM to put 10 kilo a week in and get wiped out by the bream. I'm not doing it. So I took the full fat GLM out of the bait. But it's always something that I'm meant to do on Acton because they're older mirrors, they're like 30 years old. But I just never got around to doing it. But I wondered if that would have, because they're older fish, would it have, obviously the mirrors on Selby were 45 years old. the originals, would 30-year-old would they benefit from the full fat GLM? And then I never got around to it because I was doing well on the liver fish meal. But I was just wondering if it is the anti-inflammatory effect. What, in a feed bait, which would it single out the big old mirrors?
I think it's.
I never got around to doing it.
With full fat GLM, I think it's more than just the DMPT and that side of things. Which a lot of
I don't think that's. No. I don't think that is anything. Because someone was asking me about DMPT and hook baits, and I said, I can't see the benefit of DMPT in a hook bait. Because what DMPT does, if you listen to people, is it acts as a methyl donor. Basically, it's involved in osmoregulation and it acts as a methyl donor because it's dimethyl propionate. Yeah. So unless that carp ingests and digests that bait, then it can act as a methyl donor. What is it doing? Because it's supposed to increase feed intake like betaine. Betaine is supposed to act as a methyl donor and acting on osmoregulation. So my point is that unless the carp, if you put it in a feed bait and it ingests it, then yes, it's going to improve the carp's osmoregulation if it's short of that betaine. But what is it doing in a hook bait?
Would you not add betaine to your hook baits?
I don't, because I used to use anhydrous betaine on Selby, and then afterwards I tried DMPT and I took them out and I noticed not a jot of difference. But I was using both paste and liquid original L030, and I don't think there's been a better additive ever than that. And I also had CPS P90 and sodium caseinate in that, and full fat GLM in that bait. So I think, and then I was talking to Dino about it, and he said, "Well, you've got betaine in fish meals, and obviously you've got betaine in molasses, you've got betaine in the GLM." So he says it's different if you put it in a bird food. But I honestly did not notice any difference. The thing, what I've noticed the difference, the additives what work instantly and catch fish. In terms of, I wouldn't add betaine, but organic acids all day.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to aminos, it's something with L-glutamine in it. So you've got all your hydrolyzed vegetable protein type things, your yeasts, and your fish meals. Fish meals have got a shit ton of L-glutamine in, and that's why I think they work. In addition to things like 5-IMP, and you've got biogenic amines in it as well, depending on how it's processed. You've got all sorts going on in fish meals. But betaine, the jury's out on that. I put it in and then took it out and didn't notice a difference. But it was a very good bait anyway, so these things can be percentages, can't they?
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it? I think a lot of the time with the betaine HCl, it's probably a pH shift, isn't it? There might be.
No, but I was using the anhydrous.
Yeah.
It was just straight betaine. But I was catching all. Like I said, I was catching all the mirrors. Didn't notice a difference. Put it in, took it out. DMPT, put it in, took it out. Didn't notice a difference. Whereas you started doing hot soaks, you started putting high levels of pre-digested in. Big difference. Do you know what I mean? The game changers. You put in enzymes and playing with alcohols and stuff like that. The commons in warm water, big difference.
You're saying about the L030 as being, an extremely attractive substance. Yeah, and I agree. An amazing product back when it was available. Let's just unpack that. What do you think it was that was so special about L030?
I don't know, because I've never seen a profile of it. But what I know of it, it was made by Sea Garden.
Yeah.
And what I heard, and I don't know whether this is true or not, was that it was a food grade, basically like a taste enhancer made for things like soup bases and things like that. Now, if that's the case, it is likely to be high in L-glutamine, because if you look at things like Worcester sauce and other stuff, they have anchovy extracts in them, things like that, and that comes from, in the fish, or yeast, it's the L-glutamine and it's the nucleotides together.
Mm.
Now, I suspect, I don't know because I've never seen a profile of it. I just know when I've used it in a bait, it is deadly. I think it's something to do with the way they processed it, or it was high in L-glutamine. It's a fish protein extract, so it's probably got, well, it will have a lot of nucleotides in it. And I think there's some synergy there.
So why would you not get something like Salmigo, which is a salmon hydrolysate, and just add the bits in that you want? Do you think that could render a same effect or not?
Well, I'm getting the same effect now because it comes to, again, like I said, Dino is has it down. When you start making bait, right? Some of the first baits I made, I put everything I thought was attractive. There was about 18, 20 ingredients. There was spirulina, there was liver, there was this, there was that. There was everything in it at like 2 and 3%. There was like 20 ingredients, additives. A lot of them are doing the same thing. Basically, in a bait, if you've got something like Belacanin, you've got all the organic acids you'll ever need. You've got rotted protein, so you've got a lot of L-glutamine in there. It's rotted, so you've got biogenic amines in it. All these things, there's everything you want in that. You throw some squid sauce in it, again, the same things in it. It's got anchovy extract in, hasn't it, which has been anaerobically fermented. You've got the same thing. You don't need to put cheese powder in with those. If you throw a bit of keramine in and a bit of, when you could get it, maybe a bit of keramine and some Brocacel, and you've got a fish meal in anyway, you've got everything there.
Yeah.
You've got absolutely everything there. The difference is, back then, when I was using L030, I was putting between 30 and 50 mil of the liquid in and probably 50 grams of the it was like a pasty powder, wasn't it, the spray dried stuff. But I was only putting 5% CPS P90 in. So in terms of powder, you've only got 10% sort of CPS P90 equivalent plus the 30 mil of the liquid. Whereas in my liver fish meal, I'm putting 12% CPS P90, 5% hydrolyzed liver, which, you know, you get everything in hydrolyzed liver, haven't you? From bile salts to all the nucleic proteins to all the vitamins. You've got loads of choline in it. The point is, you've got everything in that bait with what you're already putting in. When I was putting 8% L0 in, I didn't have all the other goodies in necessarily in that concentration. So you're substituting one for the other.
Makes sense. Yeah. Are you using bovine liver or pig or chicken?
No, the chicken liver hydro from BAF.
Chicken. Well.
Because that's the only thing I can get hold of.
Yeah.
But as far as I'm aware, that is the original trigger powder.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I wouldn't know.
I'm pretty certain it is.
Right.
I'm pretty certain the original trigger powder is chicken liver hydro.
Ken Townley would be the man to ask for that. He'd know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've not sort of... I've no sort of literature on it to prove it, and you know, it's supposedly the Holy Grail is hydrolyzed bovine liver, isn't it? If you can get a pharmaceutical grade hydrolyzed bovine liver, that is supposed to be the Holy Grail. But where'd you get it from? In kilo quantities? Yeah, you probably have to order. Can you get it?
You can get it. Kenny Gates, who I get my bait from, manages to source it. Yeah, it was a little bit easier to get a bait.
Boxes. He's not buying it in kilos, is he?
Sorry?
He's not buying it by the kilo. He'll be buying a 20-kilo box.
Oh, he'll be... Well, I don't know, mate, actually. I don't know.
That's how it's packed. If it's a pharmaceutical grade hydrolyzed bovine liver, it'll be in 20-kilo boxes. It's probably coming from Holland. You can't get it... I can't get it in a kilo. Unless I go to someone like Kenny Gates and say, sell us some.
He showed it to me, and it is a different kind of gravy.
Beautiful, I bet.
Yeah, no
Yeah, I
pun
bet it is.
intended. But yeah, it's different great
But
shit.
again, yeah, it is. Here's the thing, though. How much difference does it make at 5%, say, when you've got 12% CPS P90, Belacan, LT, Brocacel? What I'm saying is, what percentage is it adding to that bait, and then your hot soaking and organic acids?
I mean, I'm talking for him now, which is not good, but I think Kenny would say a lot of difference. I think he spends quite a lot on
right.
it.
No, what I'm saying is, if I could get hold of it, I would use it myself.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, I used to be obsessed, like you're saying, you paying 60 quid for the full fat GLM. I've taken it out and arguably got better results.
Yeah.
Because I understand what everything is doing in that bait.
Yeah, there's a workaround to be had, isn't there? That's the thing.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, if I could get hold of it, I would rip his hand off. But the way I look at it now is, if I've got everything I want in that bait, and that bait is suiting the application that I'm doing, what percentage is it adding? Because I'll tell you now, there's nothing, I don't think, what's more attractive for carp than citric acid in terms of gustation. I'm not on about olfactory signalling. I'm on about making a carp eat a bait. But in my opinion, it's how you apply it. Same with the other gustatory organic acids. I think those are the key to gustation with the other stuff what's in it. And all I'm saying is, yes, the holy grail is the bovine, but how much more is it adding than the chicken liver hydro? Because they've both got the bile salts, they've both got the nucleic proteins in them. They're both meat extracts, so they'll have all the L-glutamines and everything else in it. What extra percentage is that adding at 5%? Because you're looking at a certain percent of 5% in addition to everything else you've got in the bait, haven't you? That said, he put a word in, and I'll tell him I want some. I watched on one of the Facebook bait groups I'm in. One of the lads posted a link to the YouTube video. You know where what's he called? The guy who fishes rainbow.
Kevin Ellis.
You know when Kevin Ellis went down to his factory?
Yeah.
And he was turning labels around and all that. I really enjoyed that. I thought that guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He really does. But even if he was to offer me free bait, and this is not knocking Kenny Gates, I don't know him. He obviously knows what he's talking about. Even if Kenny Gates said, I'll sponsor you, here's 100 kilo or whatever, I wouldn't use it. And that is no disrespect to him or anybody else in the bait game. I like playing with my baits. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. It's fair enough.
And that is not a dig at Kenny Gates, because he obviously knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And he's got top level ingredients. Like you say, he doesn't keep his flavors long. But I like doing it my way.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you, dude. I was the same for many years. I don't have the time now, and I just can't do it. I have to give it up. I don't want to. I'd rather roll my own, but the fucking time involved.
That made me laugh when you said that. When you said you formulated it, you came up with a game plan, you went into the roller, and you thought, I couldn't be arsed. That is me. That is me.
Yeah.
Every week.
Yeah.
Every week. Yeah, every week I'm just like, I can't be arsed rolling them. Especially like for Grenville, because you're gonna put a lot in, even when you're not catching. You're gonna put, you're gonna try and take 8-10 kilos there for less than 48 hours. And you know, it's just like every week I've got to do that, and I just can't be arsed. But I can't not do it.
Yeah.
Do you understand? It's like
I've
got to keep all these ingredients. I've got to knock the base mix up. I've got to, if I'm gunning it out, but it doesn't roll because it's so soluble. so I'm rolling barrels. I've got to gun it all, like boil it, clean all the pans, or if I'm bricking it, it's just rolling bait is crap. Fair play to people who do it as a job. It's different if you've got an automated machine, but when you're at my sort of level where you're doing 100, 200 kilos a year, it's just nut aching it every week. But I can't not do it. A, because I'm interested in it. B, I have the utmost confidence in the bait, even if it's like I said in 2018 when it went warm. I should have jumped on the nut mix straight away, and I didn't. And that's when it all clicked. When I thought, "Oh, you dickhead! You know, I could have done well. I reckon I could have done well when no one else was catching." Because the lake, honestly, the lake did not do fish for like 10 days, and then we'd get a low pressure in on the weekend, and I wasn't fishing the weekend. And the lake would kick off. You get a low pressure in, the temperature drop, you get rain coming into it, some extra oxygen, and the fish would do, whole lake would do 6 fish, or 6 pegs did 2 fish each. So it did, in one weekend after a hot spell, it did 12 fish in 48 hours from 6 different pegs. And Acton that's before the stockies. That was like miraculous. And then it went hot again and didn't do a fish for like 10 days, 2 weeks. And I thought if I had gone in with high-fat nut mix there, I reckon I would have cleaned up. Not cleaned up, but I think I would have had a fish every so often. So that's something I'm gonna look at for sure. But that is because you roll your own. It would have meant ordering all the separate ingredients, getting them in, mixing the base mix up, and reacting quickly to that situation. And while I was umming and ahhing, and then we'd have a low pressure drop, and it'd fish well, and then it'd go hot again. I thought I should have got some nut mix done. Should have had it in the freezer done. That made me absolutely wet myself when you said it. You planned it all out and you just couldn't be asked. I thought, mate, absolute classic that.
I was geared up for it. I bought an electric gun and everything. Like,
you need an electric gun.
Yeah.
You may as well kill yourself if you're not got an electric gun.
We used to use pneumatic. Yeah, we used to use pneumatic. But new technology, I suppose, isn't it? Times have moved on. I don't think you can beat a pneumatic, to be honest. They got the raw power there, haven't they?
Yeah, that's what I've got now. I remember when I used to use the old Gardner metal one, and by the time you come 3 kilos, your arm's falling off.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah. Absolutely brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I reckon if I was to do more time on Grenville and put a lot of bait in, see what happens there is he'll bait up from the boat. He likes a lot of bait going in to feed his fish, so he will bait up in his boat. If you put a marker out, he'll put bait out. No, I don't do it because I don't get there till sort of noon, and then I've only got sort of just under 40 hours to go. I don't see the point in me filling it in, because if I get a small pod of fish coming along, I might overfeed them. Do you know what I mean? I just think I've got more chance just seeing how it goes and spotting it out. But if I was doing more time there, I reckon I would want to put more bait out, and therefore I'd have to get a machine. I'd have to get an automated system because I couldn't be rolling 20, 30 kilo in one go on the system I've got.
No.
If I do 10 kilo in a day, in an afternoon, that's enough for me. It really is. It's horrible.
No, I feel you.
But yeah, I was killing myself when I listened to that. I just thought, man, I know where you're coming from there.
Here's a question then, just to round up a few things you've spoken about. I mean, I don't know how we're doing for time. Dive off if you need to.
No, I'm fine, mate. Honestly.
So for the listeners that have been listening intently, and I'm sure they've got a few questions, running around their mind. First off, in your opinion, Stephen, can we single out big fish? And if we can, how would we go about doing that?
First of all, try and find out if you've got a target fish in a lake. If the lake's got one big fish in it that you want, first of all, what is it? Is it a mirror? Is it a male or a female, or is it a common? Then I would direct. If it's a big female mirror, and you're going in blind, I would go in a fish meal, a heavy fish meal. A lot of LT, like 30% LT, some pre-digested, maybe some liver, some Brocacel, whatever, but a heavy fish meal. You could put GLM in, you could put Robin. It doesn't matter what goes in, but if it's a heavy fish meal.
Yeah, standard fish.
Standard fish meal, a red fish meal, whatever. That's for your big female. If it's a big male, I'll try and find out what it gets caught on. They will pick up fish meals, but if it's more of a predatory fish, especially if it's a big long thing, then potentially a brighter bait, a nut mix. If it's a common, and if it's a male common, again, I would go with the bright nut mix with your molasses. Particles work well, maize works well, your molasses. But I think a nut mix.
Now when you say a bright bait, sorry to interrupt you, are you on about like I have to ask because people will be listening and asking this question themselves. Are you on about like a bright fluorescent orange pop up?
No. I'm on about a bright feed bait. I mean, it'll probably be a sucker for a yellow or a white hook bait. If it's a male common or a big common, big commons are suckers generally for a yellow or a white, maybe a pink, depending on. I think males and commons being more predatory, you're more likely to get on a brighter hook bait, not a fluoro, but maybe a dull white or a dull yellow or a washed out pink. Certainly, I think brighter hook baits. I think they sight feed more. But the thing about really pressured fish is they've been single hook baited to death. It works in spring when the pressure's not been on for at least 3 months. But once anglers come back on the lake, you know what I mean? Certain fish shy off bright. I think like the big females, I think you better catching them on a fish meal, a dark hook bait. But I think the more predatory that target fish is, the more susceptible it is to a bright hook bait.
You think a male common, or well, big commons, but particularly male commons, are more
and male
predatory.
mirrors to some extent. They're more prone to sight feeding. No, it's not, nothing's cut and dried.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that is the case. But the thing about the nut mix is, it has everything. It's visual, and it has the things in that commons like.
Such as.
So if you were going for a male mirror, I would look at if you can get it on a fish meal sweet, because if there's big mirrors, female mirrors there, it's nailed on. But I think the male. The big males I've had on Acton, I've had the in the lower lake, the biggest male there is white tips. I've had it twice. I've had it once on a single white pop up, like literally 2 days before it spawned, and the other time I had it in May, but the water was a lot colder over my liver fish meal. The Atwell male I had on my nut mix. The peach I had over my bright. My Grenville's Golden Balls. I had a 37 male mirror on my Grenville's Golden Balls. I had the double back male on my Grenville's Golden Balls. I have had some bigger males like to 35 on my fish meal. But I would certainly say on the brighter baits and the not whole fish meals, I would say I've had a bigger percentage of my big males. But I have had decent males on out and out fish meals because nothing is 100%. They're still eatable.
Yeah, of course.
But certainly, and it depends when you're fishing for it. If you're fishing in the spring, I wouldn't go with a full fat peanut. I would go with a defatted 12% peanut protein and cut the fat down. In the spring and certainly if it in the winter, if you're going for it in winter, I would still use the peanut protein, but cut all the fat out of the bait. Because I think the thing about nut mixes is if you're with a defatted peanut protein, there's a hell of a lot of fibre in it. So nut mix is still work in winter because the fibre goes straight through the fish. And here's another thing what we haven't touched on is winter baits. My ideas about out and out cold water baits is just fibre. You want something what goes through that fish quick. So the only thing, some people advocate milk proteins in winter, and I personally don't see it because I don't think they've got the enzymes to do it. And if it hasn't got the enzyme activity, and if it hasn't got enough fibre in it, it's not. The gut transit time's slow. So in winter, I would base a bait on a lot of fibre, like hemp expeller.
Mm-hmm.
And the only protein sources, the only whole intact protein sources I would have in, well, I wouldn't have any intact protein sources. It would be hemp expeller, carbohydrates, bird foods, and the only thing in would be pre-digested proteins, whether some CPS P90, some my dedicated winter bait, which I don't roll anymore because I can't be arsed having all the ingredients. I don't fish that much in winter because it's been frozen, hasn't it? So there'd be no point in having a lot of ingredients. But it's basically a liver, hemp, and bird food. So it's got pre-digested chicken liver in it. It's got hemp expeller, and it's got red factor, CLO, maize flour, no added fat. And what that does is when the fish eats it, the hemp expeller basically draws a lot of water in. And that water, it helps digestion, but it passes through, it bulks up the bait, and the bait goes through the fish. So depending on it, it doesn't necessarily digest a huge amount of it, but it doesn't block the fish up. It speeds up the gut transit time. And I think a low-fat nut mix would do the same in winter. So if you were going after a big common in cold water, then I would make a low-fat nut mix with a 12% defatted peanut protein, some tiger nut, and then some maize, and the rest of the crap you put in. And that would help with it's a visible bait, it's visual, and it's got what commons seem to like. So that's the way I would go until I get more information. Do you know what I mean? If you know that your target fish comes out in a white pop-up, then you fish a white pop-up, wouldn't you?
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you're just going in blind and you think, well, it's a 40-pound male, then I'm gonna try this till I know any more information. If you go on a lake and everybody's using fish meal and it comes out on a fish meal, then it's probably worth trying a fish meal, isn't it? Mm. If you know that fish gets caught, even if it's a male or it's a common or whatever, if it gets caught on a fish meal, it gets caught on a fish meal. It's like the biggest common in Selby used to come out on all different baits. It was a female. It used to come out on all different baits, but it did get caught a lot of time on a yellow hook bait. Mm. But when I started on Selby, nearly everybody was using ice red. So what is it going to eat? If there's ice red going in, it's going to eat ice red. Yeah. But it got caught a lot of times on a yellow hook bait. In fact, I think I lost it once. I couldn't buy a bite. And Bullet, the lad who runs it, he's an absolute character. But he gave me half a tin of Tigers. I think it was Bait Tech or something. And I was scratching. And I basically put them in just a little bag, put a tiger on, a bit of plastic on the top, cast it out, and I had just the most enormous fight off a common, and I lost it in the pads, and I'm pretty sure it was a scar. Mm. And again, that was a yellow bit of corn on top of a tiger nut, and I couldn't buy a bite on anything else. And this was when I was using my fish meal before I went on the nut mix. And I'm 99% certain that was the biggest common in the lake.
Yeah. Obviously, time of year affects this, but earlier on, you were on about...
Absolutely.
Earlier on, you were on about targeting commons, big commons specifically. with fat dominant bait, so the main
No,
macronutrient.
if it's cold water, I wouldn't have any fat in it. I would use defatted peanut protein.
Yeah, I think you weren't on about winter though, were you?
No. If I was going after a common in winter, I would use a defatted. If I wasn't using a white winter single, if I was actually putting bait in, and it was a big common, I would use a defatted peanut protein feed bait. The defatted peanut protein, the peanut expel is 12% fat, but it's got more fiber than roasted peanut meal because you've taken the fat out.
Yeah, I'm not on about winter. I thought earlier you were saying.
Oh no, right. In summer, in warm weather, you want the full fat roasted peanut meal.
Yeah, you were talking about higher fat baits for commons in general in summer, weren't you?
Yeah, in summer, but that's a function of dissolved oxygen.
So what my question was going to be,
go on,
and I'm sure the listeners will be asking this, is do you think that that's working in as much as how they feel after eating it, or is there some kind of attraction going on, or what?
Well, two things. One's a metabolic function, as in a carp in low dissolved oxygen isn't going to feel energetic.
Yeah. So it's how they feel after eating that higher fat.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to process into energy, isn't it?
It eats it. It takes the lipids out. Its lipase enzymes are working really well.
Yeah.
It's got a big fiber content. It rockets through. And basically the carp is taking, in my mind, is taking carbohydrate and fat off it. It's gotten a lot of energy, and it's feeling better because it's not got a huge biological oxygen demand on it, so it feels better. However, I don't know the exact neurotransmitter setup of a carp, but it must have a sense of either well-being or it doesn't feel that good.
Mm-hmm.
Or, its biochemical activity will make it torpid. If it's not getting enough oxygen to metabolize the food, it's got to feel that, hasn't it? In some sense, I think.
Definitely.
So I think if you give it a high fat bait in low dissolved oxygen, that carp is getting energy.
Mm-hmm.
That is in humans. If you eat fat, your brain releases dopamine, doesn't it? If you eat fat and sugar, your brain releases dopamine because you evolved like that. Because they're high calorific foods with instant energy. That is going to be something what's selected for it has been selected for in humans. You eat high calorific foods, you get a dopamine response, so you repeat that action. I suspect, and this Patrick Mills said it, I don't know if he's got any biological evidence for it, but I suspect carp like fat. There's no chemo, as far as we know, pure fats don't cause a chemoreceptive response. If you look at the Loeb paper of it's either 58 or 60, they tested soya oils on carp, and there was no feeding response until there was fish particles in it. And then once there were fish particles in the soya oil, there was a feeding response. So that says carp can't detect oils. But that doesn't mean there isn't a physiological response when they ingest it. Now, like I was saying to you before, back in the day of the Premier days when they were loading loads of fish oils on fish meals and the carp went absolutely berserk for them, that is a different process than having a nut mix in a low oxygen environment. Because in the nut mix in the low oxygen environment, the carp isn't digesting any appreciable amount of protein out the nuts. Because if you look at roasted peanut meal, it's granular, as in lumps of little lumps of peanut, and when it shits it out, it's still granular. Now that granular is composed of the peanut protein and everything else what's in it. That's still structurally intact, so they're not taking a lot of protein out of that when it's ripping through them and you see a carp shit out in your net or your sling and it's eating a nut mix. It's like peanut butter. I suspect that they're taking some of the fat out and shitting the rest out, and that fat isn't creating high biological oxygen demand, so the carp feels better Because I said this to Dino, and he said no, he didn't think it was a point. And I said, and then he said, yeah, but when I said about getting the bites in the daytime, and he said, yeah, people have been saying that about him, but his nut makes a squirrel. And then I spoke to him recently, and he said, yeah, that he thinks there is something in it. That it's a metabolic effect of using less oxygen.
It's very easily transverted to energy. It's a low biological strain.
Yeah.
It also, mitochondria needs to be fueled and replenished, and obviously fat is the easiest way to do that. So, yeah, it's got a lot.
And it's no other source. It's no other source of it in the lake. If you think when it's hot, when it's hot and a carp, there's loads of naturals about snails and what have you, but they're all water. If it's eating snails, a lot of that snail is water, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's not eating a kilo of HMV fish meal boilies in its gut where it's just got, it's eating a kilo of boilies. The boilies are sat there. The enzymes are working fine, but it can't do anything with that protein, can it?
No.
To metabolize that protein is going to require a lot of oxygen. It's in a low oxygen environment. That carp's not going to be happy. So it doesn't. I just don't. Honestly, when I fished and it's been hot on fish meals, they just don't want to know. But on the nut mix, different story.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can put it down to is oxygen.
Is your nut mix got a considerably lower protein content as well?
A lot lower protein.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. When they digesting a full fat protein, a full roasted peanut boilie, they're not taking hardly any protein out of that. They're taking some carbohydrate and they're taking the fat out of it, and the rest is coming out the back end. And there is roasted peanut meal isn't high in protein relative to fish meals and milks. But given the structure of a peanut, in that you've got all the fiber and the fat holding it together, how do the proteases attack that protein? And vegetable proteins aren't that digestible anyway, are they?
No.
Relative to fish meals. So in my mind, it's taking the fat out. The carp feels good. You do well on full fat nut mixes. In addition to that, you have the sight feeding benefits for males and commons. So you're getting both sides of it in that. That's to my mind.
It makes perfect sense. I've got 2 more questions for you, mate. You fish. If you need to go for a piss, just let us know. We'll edit it out. Not a worry.
No, I'm fine, honestly. I'm out of beer.
I know, mate. I've done quite a lot.
Good man.
You fish busy circuit waters. Obviously, they often have the swims stitched up. The swims that are doing the goods, very hard to get in them. We've all experienced that, unfortunately. Obviously, there's only so much. Yeah, obviously, there's only so much you can do in terms of attracting them into your area, just due to the carp sensory apparatus. Obviously, it can't work wonders.
No, you can't. You can't attract them into your area.
Yeah, only from a certain distance, though, isn't it? So, what would you do?
This is the one thing I've learned, right? Is carp will be where carp want to be.
Exactly. That's my point. So
let's say you've just got to blank through it.
There we go. You've answered it.
You've got to blank through it until you get it. You can't attract carp. It's from a bait point of view into your swim. Carp will be where they want to be, or they back off the angling pressure, and all you can have is your trap set with the best bait you can put in there, in the best application, which is the most important bit. It's the application, the method you put it in, suited to what is going on in that environment. That is the absolute key. I had my fish meal, which I used on Celibate, was absolutely amazing in terms of everything, but it wasn't suitable to catch the commons. So even no matter where I put it, I still wasn't picking up the bigger commons. So that bait was good for mirrors, but it wasn't good for commons. If you know, so it's the application what suits it. If you're fishing somewhere where you can't disturb the fish, then you need longevity in terms of your attractive profile. Because you can't keep baiting up on the heads. If you can bait up on the heads, then you'd be putting big dollops of sloppy ground bait and spotting on the heads. Because that gives you, like Patrick Mills said, every 20 minutes he puts a new dollop on his method feeder or his TVA bag or whatever. Well, yeah, if you can time it every 20 minutes to deliver a discrete amount of attraction, then that is a result, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you're waiting 24 hours for a bite, then whatever Patrick Mills' his solution is useless in a pressured angling, because you can't keep recasting a bag when disturbance is absolutely everything. I've had a lot of my fish on Acton leaving my upbaits out till I get a bite. Like 45 hours in, I'll have my first bite in a worst case scenario. Before I started doing my hot soaks, that was standard. If it was weird, I'd recast. I mean, when I had the first bay the first time, I put 1,500 baits out. I left it out 24 hours, recast once, one cast, waited another 24 hours, so that's 40 hours in, I had my first fish. I put 6 bombs out of boilies back on the spot at 6 a.m., recast the hook bait, and it was 2:30 the following morning when I had my next bite off that spot. So that spot in 3 days did 2 bites, and that was a result.
Sorry, Stephen, you've mentioned a few times tonight, or more than a few, about your hot soaks.
Yeah,
and I'm quite interested in this. So what sort of? I don't want to sort of like equal your secrets out of you, but what sort of process do you go through?
Do you mean the actual soak?
Yeah.
Or I formulate the base mix to take the hot soak.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, both my HMV liver fish meal or my Grenville's Golden Balls, or if I was doing a nut mix, would all have 10% Oragel in them.
Yeah.
The HG80. And they come out like rubbers, but because the 2 fish meals are 23% pre-digested, you have to do that for it to retain any integrity. And because if you don't put the Oragel in and then put a hot soak on it, that bait isn't going to last long.
No.
It's going to, break up. When you've got Rudd, like in Acton, you've got Rudd, then that's a problem. And then on top of that, I will do some form of a soak. I've done it when I've not had time. I've put literally fresh orange juice.
Yeah.
Because it's got ascorbic acid, it's got citric acid, and it's got, well, I think it's got citrus bioflavonoids. It's got beta carotene in it. So orange juice on its own, fresh orange juice, is a really good soak. On top of that, if I'm doing it, I will get a jug of water, boil a kettle. I get my bucket, drop the boilies in it, lather the Namplar all over it, and then I make my hot soak. I put a big tablespoon of HVP, powdered HVP, tablespoon of citric, stir it up, pour it over the boilies, stick the lid on the bucket, and that goes fishing with me. If I don't use those boilies, they come home and go back in the freezer. And then go back out again. And I'll do that twice if I need to.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because it's just absorbing it all in.
Yeah. But the thing is, right, when people put citric in their eggs or their base mix, it's locked into the bait.
Which is, yeah. Go on.
So when they put a dry bait out, they take it out the bag or whatever, well it in with a catapult, throwing stick, whatever. What's the citric leak off on that? And how do you know?
Exactly, yeah.
Because that's what Miss Patrick was saying about the S-Core. I tried the S-Core and said, I tried the liquid, the pellets, and the boilers, and caught nothing. And I'm not slagging him off because I might not have been on fish. It's not what I'm saying is, again, it was bite times. you weren't baiting up every 10 minutes. You were putting them out and leaving them for 24 hours. But my point is dilution. Tank tests are one thing where you've got a discrete amount of water. You've got however many gallons, but it isn't really moving.
Mm-hmm.
You've not got massive undertows in a tank test. You're using juvenile fish so they can fit in a tank. And there's possibly a difference in sensitivity to a small 2-pound carp to a 40. There's certainly no angling pressure. So you've got a so the hot salt works because the attraction is external, and it's not attracting them from a distance. That's not how it works. How it works is the fish either sees that pile of bait or it's grazing in that area. If you're lucky, it comes across that bait, it gets near it, and then its receptors go off because of the external soak.
Mm-hmm.
If it's within, I don't know, the premium time seems to be 6 to 8 hours. So I'm assuming that when it comes across that bait, there's still enough in there to attract them, and they think, I'm going to eat that. And then they start chewing it, and that's when the magic happens. Why I say the magic happens. When they start chewing that bait, that's when it starts blowing it out of its gills. Once it starts blowing it out of its gills, there's a cloud of attraction around its head, where its head is covered in receptors and its barbules, and it's buried in a cloud of attraction. Because the baiting's a tight spot and it's not put out with a throwing stick, that fish isn't going anywhere because it's on that bait. And its head is covered. Its head is buried in that bait. It's blowing itself a cloud of attraction, and then in my mind, that's when it's going to drop its guard thinking, I'm eating this, because it's self-stimulating. What he calls the involuntary feeding reaction is chemosensory stimulation, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is what I'm trying to achieve as it's eating my pile of 80 boilies, which have been spommed out in a tight spot, and then worst case scenario, if it takes 24 to 40 hours for them to eat it, there should be some CPS P90 left or some liver, and the fish meals or the other proteins will start being hydrolyzed by the lake's bacteria.
Absolutely.
So that bait, in the 48 hours that I fish, that bait is attractive for the whole 48 hours from the moment it hits the spawn, hits the water, to the moment I go home after a blank. Yeah, I've blanked, I haven't eaten it. But that bait is attractive in one way or another through that 48-hour period.
Yeah.
And that is, I think if you put a standard freezer bait out, whoever's freezer bait, and it goes in dry, then it'll take, depending on water temperature, 6 to 12 hours. If it's a lower temperature, maybe longer, before water is diffused in. And nothing can come out of that bait till water is diffused in. So there's nothing coming off it. An absolute minimum 6 hours, between 6 and 24 hours, there's nothing coming off that bait, depending on water temperature, water movement, naturals, and everything else. There's so many variables.
I was going to say, breaking up baits can sort of negate that, though, can't it?
Absolutely. But if you've got rub there, you can't break your baits up. I've been on the damn wall on Acton, dropped a nut mix down so you can see it, and it doesn't drop straight down. It goes left, right, left, right, left, right in a zigzag because the rudder hitting it as it goes down. So you couldn't spam crumb out on Acton, wouldn't hit the bottom.
Yeah.
So you put in whole baits out because that is the application you require. If I could put something out, I'd put paste balls out. I'd put like orange sized paste balls out with a catapult. If they weren't asked about disturbance, I won't be using boilies. I'd just be using paste, and no egg paste, wet or sloppy spod mix, and I'd be filling it in every half hour. But you can't do it.
Why don't you use a mix though? Well, so you've got some paste going out there, you've got some boilie.
Yeah, but I don't need to because of the hot soak. The point is, it's disturbance in the swim, and the big originals, it's different now. He's put the stockies in, but when I started, disturbance was honestly when they were moving.
No, I understand that. Yeah,
if a lake doesn't do a fish, right? You got everybody on Acton is very good to exceptional in general angling terms. There's no noddies on there, so the fish are pressured.
Yeah.
So when the fish are moody, there's times that I haven't done a fish for. It's different now because he's put the stockies in, but back before he put the stockies in, sometimes he wouldn't do a fish for 10 days.
Yeah.
Now, there could be 7 anglers on of a weekend. That's 21 lines. In the week, there could be 4 or 5 anglers on 7 days a week, and the lake hasn't done a fish for 10 days. I'm not saying they're not eating bait, because they are. But they're not getting caught because they know they're being fished for. The masters at getting rid of rigs. You know, you got the slope. It's just done £50, and it comes out once a year. That fish isn't just getting big off mudworm.
No, exactly.
It's done £50 when Rob has put 100 stockies in total, and it's still done its biggest ever weight. All the fish weights are up. Since he's put the stockies in, all the fish weights have gone up because all the originals are having to eat bait before the stockies have it. So consequently, all the fish have actually gone up in weight, which is the exact opposite of what you think they'd do. And that slope has still only done 1 capture a year. And it's come out, like biggest I've had it is 46.5 and it's done £50 too. So that's troughing bait all year and not getting caught.
Definitely. And then you got to look into how is that fish feeding? You know, is it picking up bait
Carefully.
different from a fish? Yeah, exactly. But the angle which it approached, does it not move off? You know, the mechanism of rigs, then you got to look at that side of things as well.
Absolutely, yeah. But that doesn't interest me. I don't care. I think I will make that fish feed hard. I will make that fish feed hard, and I will catch it because I'll make a mistake because I'll give it something it wants to eat. And I'm not saying if I was into rigs and rig mechanics and I could tie better rigs, or if I watched the water longer, I'd probably catch more. But I go carp fishing to make me happy.
Yeah.
I don't go day fishing. I like bivvying up. I'm happy as a pig in the shit when I'm in my bivvy. I bivvy up, I get there, and honestly, I feel the most amazing sense of calm when I get there. I just feel wonderful. And I fish, I do it my way. Like I said, no matter what you offered me in the bait world, I wouldn't take it because I like making my own bait. I do everything my own way. And that's how I get enjoyment. I go fishing to be happy. It is about catching the fish, and we all get what we like out of angling. But I just love doing it my way, and rigs just don't do it for me. If someone said this rig is a deadly rig, and I tied that one rig up and I caught fish on it, then I'd probably use that rig more. But generally speaking, I use soft braid with a long shank hook, like a straight long shank hook, not a long shank, but you know what I mean, a straight shanked size 6 on a KD with a 14mm bottom bait and half a 14mm pop up on top. And the only thing I do on a cleanish bottom, by clean I mean still anything other than weed, the only thing I do is alter the length of that soft braided rig depending on how deep I think that silt is. I use the same rig in a solid bag, which I've had the fish out of Grenville on, but I use it like 3 or 4 inches long in the solid bag. It's the exact same rig. I've used that rig since 2004. Back in the day, I used to use Maxima line, the exact same setup, but instead of soft braid, I use Maxima line. I've used the same rig for like 17 years. And I'm not asked about rigs. You know, you can see these lads and the rigs are absolutely perfect. They're just a work of art, some lads' rigs, aren't they? And they're always doing different things. And it's just like, the only rig I've seen, which I thought, yes, that is the one, is a lad called Jason English showed me a long, deep, low-back rig he uses. And honestly, you can't pick it up without it sticking in your fingers. It's just like, wow, that is a good pop-up rig. And I did try one on Grenville, and I had my second, when I fished in the weed, I had my second fish. But to be fair, I've caught all my big fish on solids, on my normal braided KD. So it works. And I don't catch many fish in terms of numbers. I'm not one of them who absolutely rinses it in numbers, but I definitely catch more than my share of the bigger fish. Like in my first season on Acton, I had I had 15 fish, which was decent. 4 of them were 40s. And not only that, they were like 2 of the most sought after fish in the lake. I had the Mattes and I had the slope. I had the Atwell male, which was hard to catch. So I had 3 of the hardest to catch fish in my first season, and I didn't really know what I was doing. It was down to the bait. It wasn't me being a super angler, because I'm not. I just put something out what they wanted to eat with an acceptable rig. And it's the same when I went on the lure and had the Randall. That fish comes out twice a year, and I had it in 7 days. I had it in mid-November, and it wasn't a rig. I just give it some food, what it wanted to eat. I put something highly attractive in the week before, just because there was no one on the lake, so I filled it in with a particle. But that particle was next level in terms of its attraction, the chickpeas. And then I came back 5 days later and I had that fish off the same spot. And that is all down to bait. It's nothing to do with rigs. The rig's capable of catching a fish, but it's not. I'm not catching it because of the rig. I'm catching it because of the bait on that spot.
Yeah.
And that's how I like fishing. I know some lads watch the water and they'll cast at showing fish, and they do the sort of technical things that anglers do. And I'm a bait angler. If I see I look for a bait solution to an angling problem. I don't look at a rig solution. And because I can't pre-bait, then the bait has to be instant. And have longevity over that 40-hour session that I'm doing. I'll tell you, when pre-baiting works, when I was on Nipton in 2015, when Anthony showed me around the lake in December 14, when I went down to see him, he showed me around and we went up to swim up in the shallows. There's a little bay, and the swim's called the Cave, and I thought, yeah, they'll be up here in spring. And I went into that swim. No one was fishing it, and I was putting a load of particle in to clear the spots before I left. And honestly, it made that. I ended up taking the late record. I only fished for 2 months, but that was because I was baiting up before I left, and then coming back 5 days later and fishing that spot. Whether the fish were there or not, I kept fishing that spot and putting a lot of particle in it, from the boat to clear the spots, and that was easy fishing. In sort of, I fished April, didn't fish May, went back in June, and on the 1st of July I had the late record. So I only really did 2 months, and I had 330s and its first ever 40 out of there, just by putting the fermented particle in to clear the spots and then fish boilie over it. Well, in the open water spots, I was fishing boilie soaked in the particle juice, and on the shallow spot, I couldn't put any freebies in because it was only 4 foot deep and the swans were going over it, and I fished solid bags, and I had 2 of the 30s and the 40 on solids.
Just to go back a little bit, sorry, something that I'm aware I'm aware that some people will be asking this question listening back to this. When we were talking about, how to target like the bigger fish, the bigger males, for example, what would constitute a bigger fish? Because some people that are listening, they're
Depends
perhaps
on your lake.
the bigger fish in their lake might be
If it's 25 pounds, if the biggest fish in your lake is a 25-pound female mirror, go in with a good fish meal. If you're making the bait, then go in with an LT fish meal.
But why would that fish have a difference of preference to, say, the same size fish, like a 20-odd in your lake? What's the difference? What makes it have one preference because it's a big fish compared to the other stock, compared to another lake where it's not bigger?
I think it's nothing to do with the size as such. The biggest fish in your lake is the biggest fish in your lake. If it's a female mirror, it's generally going to like a fish meal, apart from when it's low dissolved oxygen in winter. So if your best chance of catching that fish is either in the spring or the autumn. You know what I'm saying? Generally speaking, you want to catch that fish. If it's the biggest fish in the lake, just from a weight point of view and how easy it is to catch, you're going to catch it in either spring or autumn. spring and autumn is the time when fish meals are at the best. Because a carp coming out of winter is going to start building up spawn, a female. Fish meals have got everything it needs. It's got calcium, phosphorus, all the minerals. It's got the betaine for osmoregulation. It's got everything. If you're putting the Brocacel in, you're aiding the digestion. If you're putting spices in, if it's an older fish, then you've got your bioflavonoid. You're giving it everything it needs that you can give it as a bait. Yeah. If you start in April, then you give it less because the water's cold, but it still wants fish meal because it wants a protein source. It's going to put on a 25-pound fish. Say it's coming out of wind. Say its summer weight is 25 pound. Near to spawn, it could be sort of 28 to 30, couldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to put on what 20%, 15-20% of its body weight in a couple of months. So it's going to need proper food in order to do so. So fish meals are the way to go with that. With big female mirrors. Males want a more predatory, so they're probably not necessarily lacking protein sources, but they don't vary in the weight as much, do they? If a big male can drop a couple of pound. Like say when I had the double back spawned out 1st of June, it was 37.5. Now, its top weight that I know it's ever done is about 39.12. So that fish is 2 pounds and 4 ounces down from its biggest ever weight, and it's just spawned. It's not spawned, it's jizz. But my point is, it's only lost 2 pound on an upper 30. Whereas the ottered, biggest ever weight's done 47. I've known it to come out 47 just before it spawned, and it's spawned out down to about 41, 40s. So that fish, that otter, has lost 7 pound on spawning. So the reverse of that is, if it's 41s, 42s coming into early spring, by it spawns at end of May, beginning of June, it's putting on 5 pound. That fish is troughing. And fish meals have got everything it wants in terms of minerals, calcium. It also depends on the lake you're fishing. If you're fishing a gravel pit, the pH of a gravel pit is a lot higher. You're looking at 7.8 to 8.2 pH of the water. If you're fishing a silty estate lake, you've got a lower pH. Gravel pits have a lot more calcium in terms of the invertebrate life, which may or may not, depending on the pH and the calcium content of the estate lake. So fish meals have got a lot of calcium in them. So when you were talking about when fish need certain things, is fish meal providing something it doesn't have when it's coming out of winter? Probably in a lot of lakes. So on a big female, what's got a big food demand, a big nutritional demand, and fish meals are attractive to them anyway, it's possible, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it's possible that a female has slightly different, is wired differently to eat because it goes up and down, because it spawns, its nutritional requirements are going to be different from a male, aren't they?
Definitely. Wait, 100%.
In terms of calorific demand, also it's probably its mineral content.
Without a doubt.
So that's why I think fish meal scores so well, because it's close to its natural food. If you're making that bait, you can make that bait exactly how you want it, whether you want to attract naturals to it or whatever, and that is going to work. If you're going for a male, they don't have the same calorific demand. They're more sight feeders. If they're more predatory, if they're eating fish, then that's the fish meal in a wet form, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a predatory male might not be attracted to fish meal on the thing that it's eating fish, because it's got a different morphological form. A lot of males are long and lean, more like a pike shape. So they're more suited to chasing live bait about than a big wallop. You get a big walloping female, she's not suited to chasing live bait about. She'll get her head down on a bloodworm bed or a bed of bait, tip up. But you get the males I like are sort of long, big, long fish. And that is, it's more like a torpedo. And to my mind, that is more suited to predator behavior just from from its shape and it's everything about it. So and if you were going after a big common, then again, like I said, they definitely, in my opinion, sight feeders. Not 100%, definitely not 100%, but it's about stacking the odds in your favour, isn't it? It doesn't matter how big your fish are. When I was on Selby, anything over £25 was a big fish. There were 230. When I joined Selby in 2011, there were 230-pound fish in there, and one was a female, one was a male. And the female got caught all the time on a fish meal, usually ice red, and the male used to get caught on all sorts. But I didn't know then. I hadn't made this connection then. But all the evidence stacks up in my mind for the waters I fished. But yeah, what a big fish is in one lake is, I mean, if you go to where's that place? Is it Holme Fen where it's done a 75? So a 40-pounder in Holme Fen's nothing, is it? When you've got a 75-pound mirror swimming around.
Mm-hmm. True.
Yeah.
But I would say,
yeah,
I bet that 75-pound mirror hasn't got to 75 pound. It's troughing, isn't it?
It's eating for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the same thing. If I was going after if I was fishing Holme Fen in the spring, I'd be taking a heavy fish meal. Unless I knew something about that fish. Obviously, I've never fished Holme Fen, and I won't. I'm not knocking anybody who fishes it. I'm just saying I don't know anything about that fish. But if I was going in blind and I was going a week on Holme Fen in spring, I'd be taking a heavy fish meal. If I was going to France in summer, if I was going to France July and August, I'd be taking a nut mix, irrespective of what I was fishing for, because of the water temperature and the dissolved oxygen and the cats. There's no way I would take a fish meal in summer to France because it's the application.
Yeah, well, it makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. It's absolutely fascinating. There's so many different rabbit holes we could go down. We've been going for a long time. I think.
Yeah, no problem. I bet you want to go to bed now, don't you?
I mean, we want to explore it more, but it's just we've got to be respectful of time. I think that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the thing is, if anybody has any questions that we can address and we can ponder, because I find I learn a lot from people asking questions.
Yeah.
Like on in bait groups, someone might ask a question, and I think, why has he said that? That don't make any sense to me. And then it might make me think of something that I wouldn't have otherwise thought of in answer to what he's saying. So sometimes a question can elicit a response that you weren't expecting. So it's always good to talk about bait to people of all levels, because do you know what I mean? It's one of those things. What's that phrase? From out of the mouth of babes. Sometimes you get my brain is a bit weird, as you've probably gathered by talking to me. I can hold information sometimes, a lot of disparate facts, and then someone will say one sentence or one word, and I get like a chain reaction where all these disparate bits of information join up. But it isn't until I get that trigger which joins them up, because I'm not necessarily consciously thinking about them. It's just all there in the subconscious. So if when people ask questions that you might seem a bit left field, it sometimes stimulates good conversation. So yeah, it's very good. Anyway, I think I've bored you enough now. So
not at all, mate. It's fascinating, honestly, and if I'm sure people will want to hear more of you if you're ever up for a part 2.
Yeah,
we'd absolutely love it.
I'll talk. Honestly, I don't get to do this on my syndicate because people just run away.
People walk away from you. No, we love it. We love it, mate. That's all from me. I don't know if Pete Have you got anything else you want to ask Stephen before we part ways?
We'll do it quickly. Because I know time is short.
No worries.
But it was just one question, and this was just to round up. When you say people, often you learn, I guess, from people asking questions you see online. But one thing that's sort of struck with me as you were talking earlier about your bait soak. This is much earlier in the podcast.
Yeah.
You're talking about enzymes and ascorbic acid. And I know for a fact when Dean was on the podcast, he was sort of an advocate for ascorbic acid, very much for sort of protein synthesis and helping the fish sort of synthesize protein.
Yeah.
And I know another episode with Jason Ryder, he sort of claimed that ascorbic acid was one of the most attractive things to carp. Now, Dean's sort of response was very much that ascorbic acid isn't attractive to carp in their own right. They cannot detect it.
No, he said he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure.
Okay.
I think they can, because I sent a picture of Katsunian and Dovin, where it's the palatability indices of organic acids, but it was only for tench and bitterling.
Right.
And ascorbic acid scores quite highly in the palatability index.
Interesting. I'd love you to be able to share that with us if you can, mate.
Yes, it is. I got it out of John Wood's Carp Science, and I've got it on my phone somewhere. But basically, yeah, it isn't for carp; it's for tench. But tench and carp have very similar sort of taste. How I was doing it was basically I was using it. I used to do a lot of homebrew back in the day when I was into drink, and when you ferment a wine. It needs to be in an acidic environment. So usually you put ascorbic acid and citric acid in. So when I was fermenting the particle with an high alcohol tolerance wine yeast, I knew that citric acid was attractive to carp, but also essential for the ferment. I knew ascorbic acid was attractive to carp, but also essential for the ferment. Basically, Mark Holmes was on about Bob's sloppy spod mix, and it was fermented. So I thought, right, I'll give it a bash here. I thought I'll try this because of the situation with the commons at Selby. The other thing about alcohol is it's hugely soluble. So it in water, which is what you want. Also, because it's hugely soluble, it creates a diffusion gradient. So when I was baiting these enzyme soaked baits on the hour every hour, you're getting a localized leak off, and the alcohol's aiding that because it's massively soluble. So when you've got the basically the enzymes were acting on the particle and digesting some of the gluten. So you'd have a bit of probably some peptide breakage. You've got the yeast stuff going on. So the yeast is producing what yeast produce. There's all sorts come off with alcohol fermentation. Like when you're fermenting fruit and stuff, obviously you're getting ester changes and all that. So the ascorbic acid is doing two things in the alcohol ferment. It's aiding the yeast ferment, but it's also attractive in its own right. But the difference is I'm adding it externally to the boilies. So it's much more. If Dino's putting it in his boilies, when that boilie goes in dry, when he feeds the bait dry, that bait they'll only really detect the ascorbic acid when they start chewing it, which is a good thing. But there is very little external attraction from the off. I spoke to Sam about the Ari Askell and Charles Daly when they did a massive experiment about amino acid leak off in the BCSG papers, and concluded that carp don't detect boilies by amino acids because in a standard boilie there's not enough amino acids coming off above the background, which is the important part. They measured the background of all of the amino acid concentration in loads of different lakes at loads of different temperatures, and then they stuck some boilies in a tube, sucked water through it, measured the leakage of it over time, and it wasn't above background.
Okay.
So if you know how receptors work,
yeah,
you've got something in biology called neuronal accommodation. Whereas it once a neuron fires repeatedly, it becomes desensitized. It's the woolly jumper effect. You put a woolly jumper on, it itches like mad. Half an hour later, you can't feel it. And that is because the neurons have kept firing, they become desensitized, they stop firing. Well, if a carp is swimming around in a specific molar concentration of amino acids given off by a rich lake, and the boilie only matches that same concentration, then it isn't going to get a response from its receptors.
Mm-hmm.
The only time there's going to be some response is when it grazes across them or sees them, starts chewing them. If there's enough amino concentration in that, then it's in its pharyngeal teeth. It's hitting all its receptors in its mouth and round its head. But the initial feeding response is caused by either the fish coming across it and thinking there's something there, I'm going to try and eat it, or they've seen it, know it's a boilie. When I say know it's a boilie, they're familiar with round balls of food and eat it anyway, and then they get whatever's in that bait. But Harry Haskell and Charles Daly, is a professor. He works at Porton Down or something. So we're talking heavy duty science here. They're saying it isn't amino acid attraction in a standard boilie. Why are they picking it up? Because it's a sealed unit. And hence that reinforced my hot soak approach, or my other approach like my enzyme particle juice soak, because you're adding that attraction externally to the boilie. And then also when, yes, they have to become close to it because of the dilution effect of what I said about there's 1,000 litres in a cubic metre of water. Unless there's oils coming off a bait and the oils contain chemosensory substances, if a fish is swimming, say, 8 foot to 12 foot up in the water over a bait, apart from oils coming off, that fish is not detecting that bait in my mind. There's a possibility some substances you're talking mega low levels of they actually work, but in my mind that fish isn't getting a lot of chemosensory. If they're swimming over a baited patch, they're seeing it, or they're mooching in that area. Like in Acton at the top in the shallows in the summer, it can be 3 foot deep. So if you've got a 40-pound carp swimming under the surface, its belly is 1.5 foot above your bait as it swims along. So it's much more likely to detect your bait with a hot soak in that situation than on Grenville, where it's on 26 foot.
Mm-hmm.
If a carp swims over any patch of bait, unless it's oil, a lot of lads oil the baits up. So obviously, there's, if you look at the Loeb report, the Loeb 1958 or 60 paper, oils coming off bait which contain chemosensory substances, well, the carp will detect them because the oil is acting as a carrier up in the water column, which is what Nick Eller's dynamite stick was about initially, wasn't it? He developed it as a means of releasing oil. And that also may be a factor of the nutbait in warm water because it's going to release oil. And the warmer the water, the more oil is going to come up in droplet form. So that's another possibly part of it. So as the ascorbic acid, I think all day they are attracted in a gustatory sense to it. And I don't have any other than the tench information in the Katsunian paper. I've not seen anything directly for carp, but tench and carp are very, very similar in the taste preferences. So I would say all day they are turned on by it. So, certainly on, like I said, on the results on Selby, I know there was a lot of stuff going on there. There was the CSL, there was the molasses, there was the enzymes on the nut mix. There was a lot going on there, but I think throwing all those things in together, But the difference in catching commons and mirrors, the nut mix to the fish meal was because the fish meal was going in dry when I put the fish meal in, and I was catching, you know what I mean. I was still catching the mirrors and hardly any commons. But when I went on the nut mix with, and especially doing it how I was doing it, it was just unbelievable. You know, for various reasons. It was a very hot summer, but it was just mental. But yeah, to ascorbic acid all day. I mean, it's doing the fish good anyway. From what Dean said, I mean, I didn't know about the protein synthesis and all that, but obviously vitamin C is essential in humans. It's an antioxidant. It's not going to do the carp any harm, is it? But the fact that it's looks like it causes gustatory response is a bonus. I mean, I haven't put any ascorbic acid in my baits, but that's one of those things where I used to put everything in and be obsessed, and now it's like there's enough in that's a good bait, that's working, and it might be improved. I've still got a bit of ascorbic acid in my garage. My garage is just insane. I've still got some ascorbic acid. I haven't put any in, but it's not because it's not a good product. It's just the fact that what I'm doing is working. But there's a lot to be said for putting ingredients externally rather than internally in a bait. As in adding it as a soak rather than putting... Because consider this, right? If you put citric acid in a bait, the generally accepted... If you read a lot of forums, people say 1 gram per egg. Yeah? You put your 1 gram per egg, you do your bait, you dry it out. What's your molar concentration in that boilie?
Go on.
Well, you don't know, do you?
No.
Because it depends how dry it is, what other ingredients are in, and then when it comes out, it depends on the degree of hydration, the water ingress, how long it takes for the carp to eat that bait. Is that bait being sat there an hour, 3 hours, 24 hours, 40 hours? Because all that time, that molar concentration of citric is decreasing over time. And it's still trapped in the bait. It isn't coming out. So it's only when the fish chews the bait that it will get the gustatory response. But it's not the citric in the bait what is making that fish eat that bait, because there's no leakage, because it's trapped in a fucking egg-bound round ball, which is gelled with egg albumin.
Exactly.
There isn't anything coming off that bait in a meaningful quantity in a lake with millions of cubic liters of water with water movement. You're not getting it. The way you are getting it is if you add it externally, and it's not going to last forever. But depending on how often you can bait up, then if you can bait up every 12 hours, then you're going to have more than if you leave it for 48. So, it'd be interesting if anybody was to add ascorbic acid externally. Like when I've actually used the particle, it's in the particle and the juice. So if I was going somewhere like Linear, I would take my high alcohol fermented particle with all that in, because you can spom on top of their heads, can't you, on places like Linear? So if you wanted like a lot of attraction going in the water, then the way I do my high alcohol particle would, I reckon it. Well, I have done well on Linear back in 2006 doing things like that, because then you're getting the competitive feeding, aren't you? And it's going in all the time. It's that match fishing sort of little and often. You know what I mean? You've got attraction in the water all the time, but that's to the application. You design your bait around your application. If you're making your own, you may as well, because you're not stuck to a commercial bait, which is all things to all people. If you look at a commercial bait, someone takes it to, someone might be fishing Linear with it, someone might be fishing Acton with it, someone's on Grenville on it, someone's on a day ticket run type match water. Someone will take a commercial bait, and whoever makes that has got to try and accommodate all those different anglers and make money. So it's never going to be optimum. It's all things to all people. You know what I mean? So if you want to maximize, I think if you want to maximize your personal return and you're designing bait, then you look at the application you want to do and then design your bait with the best features you can design for whether it's the water temperature, it's the type of water you fish, the speed, you know, if you have to make commons or mirrors, you know, if you've got competitive feeding or you've got lone feeders, you try and optimize your approach to that. And it might not be the same. Like I said on Selby, fish meal's got the mirrors, they're not mixed with the commons. The fish meals on Acton, the big mirrors, you know, like I said, I've had the slope 3 times. I've had the Randall on my fish meal, make me liver fish meal, but the males are coming off the brighter bait. We've still got fish meal in, but it's not a heavy nutritional fish meal. And since I've not used the liver fish meal, I've not had the slope, and I've had it 3 times. And then as soon as I changed bait, I've not had the slope for 2 years. And that speaks to preferences of fish, and I put it down to big female mirrors, the nutritional demand. You know what I mean? Are their chemoreceptors more? I mean, you hear anecdotes about pregnant women sucking coal, don't you? I don't know whether it's anecdotal, but the point is, humans crave certain foodstuffs when they're nutritionally compromised, don't they?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I was speaking to Dave Moore at the NAS show, and he says he was fishing Euroaqua, and at Euroaqua, the guy goes around and putting 200 kilo of maize in each swim.
Yeah.
So Dave said, and he's written about it. He says they're short of lysine, so he went in with a high lysine bait, and he reckoned he cleaned up. Now I've not fished it, so I can't. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. And I reckon if I went in with my nutritional fish meal, I reckon I clean up.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fish, the massive, they're 100-pound fish and they're eating maize. Well, then, you know what I mean? And it's obviously got a decent stocking density because they're 100-pound fish. It don't need many 100-pound fish to hit a high biomass. So I reckon if you go in with a good fish meal, you'd clean up. Especially the times when they're requiring that. But Dave is convinced that the lysine is the way forward because they're lysine deficient because of the maize. So, you know, that's another part of the baiting strategy. Like I said, males are more predatory. They don't have the same calorific demand in terms of the spawning cycle. So as much as I don't subscribe to HMV theory because of the way modern fisheries work, nutritional baits definitely a lot of the time outperform, and when I say a lot of the time, I mean spring and autumn, nutritional baits seem to outperform other baits at that time because there is a nutritional demand. Autumn, they're building, you know, from late autumn, they start building spawn, don't they? And also they're coming into winter, the naturals are decreasing, but also the oxygen, the relative dissolved oxygen is increasing because the water temp's dropping. So you come from September to November, I reckon that's when fish meals score by and large for your bigger, you know, your bigger mirrors, and same in the spring. So that's my my theory, and I'm sticking to it until someone proves me different. But yeah, ascorbic acid, I definitely think there's a gustatory response, and it is in cat's onion and doving, but it's for tench. There isn't anything about carp.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, you seem to be doing all right by your theories, and I definitely appreciate it if you find that article on your phone just to pass it on. Because
I will. I've actually photographed it, so I'll send it through.
Ah, awesome! Nice one.
It's got all the organic acids in that list, and everything's there from malic to tartaric to propanoic. Mm-hmm. Everything, alpha ketoglutaric, which is a metabolic intermediate, all sorts. So yeah, Organic acids are the way forward, in my opinion. Right, do you wanna wrap it up now so then you can get some sleep?
Well, for the listener, yeah, it is 1:30. We have been going for, God, 5 hours, something like that, isn't it? 4.5 hours, 5 hours.
It's possible you're gonna have to edit this one, aren't you?
There's not a lot to edit out, to be honest. It's all good content. If needs be, we can do it over 2 parts. It's not a problem.
Yeah, it's
Sam,
up to you, mate. I was worried that there wouldn't be enough content because I know I'm obsessed with bait and I'll talk to anybody about it at any time.
Mate,
until a point till they want to kill themselves. But I was thinking you'd be lucky if you get an hour out of me, mate.
No, do you know what? A few guys say that. Ben from Beeping Milling, the other week, he came on and sort of spoke to us, and he said the same. I think once people sort of relax into it, and it's like having a chat with anyone on the bank, isn't it? Once you relax into it,
isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. That's what we try and do. Have you got anything sort of to add to that?
No, I just shout out to everybody who's gone before me. Like, honestly, Dean Towie, he's a legend. He's connected the dots for me. It's not much, but it's enough to have a just to help. You know what I mean? His articles. When I used to read Cartwheel back in the day, I wanted funny stories of people up to weird stuff, or bait articles, and the only decent bait articles were Dean's. Big respect to Sean Harrison. He's a legend, and I really enjoyed his podcast. I've met him at the shows a couple of times, and he is excellent. And just that, just the characters you fish with on the bank, and it's like I say, I was talking to Tony about bait. I thought I've clocked him. That kid is doing something with his bait, and I had a chat to him, and he was quite open. And you just the characters you meet on the bank who you get something positive off. The positive people, they absolutely smash lakes up. They're humble about it, and they're nice people, and you can and you've got a common interest in bait. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. I haven't done anything about bait. What I've done is I've pieced together other people's work and made it my own for my approach, my application. And the only advice I would give to anybody else is that is the way to do it. Nick everybody's information, sift through it, get rid of the crap. I will tell you what winds me up. Just a final thing. When you get these sponsored anglers saying a boilie absorbs water by osmosis, my blood boils. I almost have a stroke. It's simple diffusion. But what I'm saying is, a lot of top anglers who don't know anything about bait come out with some crap. Yeah. Listen to the people who know about bait. Your Jasons, your Seans, your Deans. Take out what suits your style of fishing. Do you know what I mean? Because if you're fishing somewhere like Linear, you're not fishing. You don't need to fish boilies. Stick paste in, stick ground bait in, stick fermented particle, either bacterial fermented particle or alcohol fermented particle, liquidize your particle. Take those nuggets of information and use them in your angling to what suits what's in front of you. Because I think the biggest mistake you make when you start making bait is X, Y, and Z is attractive. I'm going to bang them all in, and I'm going to bang them in a boilie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always the best approach.
We've all been there.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing is there is no substitute for experience in life. You can't buy experience. You can get on the internet now. It's amazing the amount of information out there, but there's the same amount or more of misinformation or information which isn't suitable to your approach. So the secret is try and learn about bait, but get the feedback from your empirical evidence, your actual angling. You can't be a bait guru without doing the fishing. Fishing a variety of waters. Like I said, I wouldn't have learned all this if I hadn't have fished Acton at that time. Before he put the stockies in, when the fish were hard to catch, there were much fewer fish and a lot of big, 40 plus males. If I started fishing Acton now, I wouldn't have picked up on those things which I think I've picked up on, because the situation in the lake is different now.
Yeah, exactly. It dictates, doesn't it?
Yeah, if I hadn't fished Selby with such a big stock of commons which I couldn't catch, I wouldn't have logged on that. If I hadn't gone to Dream Lakes when it was super hot, if I'd have gone to Dream Lakes in the spring, I wouldn't have noticed that, because the water temperatures wouldn't have been there. So you can only go off the experiences that you experience, and then try and analyze what's gone on. And it builds up over time. I've been playing with bait nowhere near as long as people like Sean. I've only been playing with bait sort of 17 years and been mega serious about 11 years. But in the last 11 years, I've done a lot of fishing on variety of waters, and none of them have been that easy. Selby wasn't rock hard, but I couldn't catch the fish, the commons I wanted. Nipton was challenging more for the ducks and the bream. Some people really struggled. I didn't find it too bad, but I went in with, it's the only lake I've gone in with a game plan from the off and done it, and it worked. Like the bait in the spots when I was leaving and then coming back a week later, and no one was in that swim until I had the late record out, and then I couldn't get back in the swim. But I'd done it then, so I wasn't asked. But the point is, you profit from the experience. You need to get the experience before you can profit from it. And that is, most things in life, isn't it, really? But that's what I would, if someone's asking for advice about bait, is try things, see what works, try and suss out what's going on in your lake, and then try and adapt your approach accordingly, rather than just think, this is a good boilie, I'm going to use it everywhere. Right, I'm going to leave you to it, because otherwise we'll be here till 4 a.m.
Easy done.
Anyway, I've enjoyed the chat anyway.
It's been awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, no, it's been great. But yeah, like I said, if anybody's any questions, they can hit your podcast up, and we can, your Facebook page or whatever, and we can try and formulate a response if anybody wants to.
For
Get
sure.
some discussions going. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've not even the thing is, we've not even touched milk proteins, and I wanted to talk about, because you were on about hydrolyzed whey, but we need to get into this another time, otherwise none of us are going to be functional tomorrow.
Mate,
So,
there's
we better leave it, really.
Yeah, we'll leave it. There's so much we could talk about, and you're a fascinating dude. We've got to get you on for a part 2. If you're up for it, we would love to have you on.
Definitely. But what would be good is if we get some specific questions.
Definitely.
If people want questions, I will give my take on it. I might not be right, but what they will get is a considered response.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
what I do is when I give an answer to someone, I either say, I know, I'm pretty sure of this because I've read it in a paper, as in Katsunya and Doven, or this is what I believe from the angling experience. That's it might open up avenues that we wouldn't otherwise think about. Like I've heard about orange oil, but I've never tried it, or tangerine oil. I've never tried it. I've tried the Nash back in the day. I've tried the Nash tangerine palatin, but I've used garlic essential oil and I've used black pepper, but I've never tried the sweet orange. I've actually got some in my garage. I've got like a 10ml bottle of which I've had for about 10 years. I've never got around to doing it. So it's every day's a school day, isn't it? It really is.
Definitely.
Right, I'm definitely going now. I'm going to leave you to it. But yeah, if people get any questions, we can all sort of chew the fat over. Then I'm more than happy to come back on and have a chat.
For the listeners, just pop your questions on the post that promotes this podcast, whether that's on Facebook or Instagram. Find the Stephen White podcast post, pop your questions in there, and we'll have some conversations in the comment section, and then we'll get it covered on the next podcast as well.
Great.
Awesome.
Cheers, Stephen. Right. Absolute pleasure. Thank you, my man.
All right. Cheers.